Welcome to this video. In this video, we'll learn dynamic interaction model. First, we start with an introduction about the dynamic interaction model. Why do we need the dynamic interaction model? And then, what is the dynamic interaction model? Also, we will learn how to develop the sequence diagram and communication diagrams. And finally, we will see the step of developing dynamic interaction model. So by the end of this class, students should be able to develop a sequence diagram, communication diagrams. Also, the student should be able to develop the stateless dynamic interaction model. So let's get started. Okay, as we know that we are study the commit methods, commit UML methods. The commit methods, as we say, is approach for study and analyze the real-time system. Real-time system, one of these real-time system is the autonomous system. So we already studied the requirements modeling, and we know how to develop the requirements modeling, and now we are in analyze modeling. So in analyze modeling, there is two steps. The first one is static model and dynamic model. In last two classes, we learned how to develop the static model, and today we will learn how to develop the dynamic model. So as I mentioned already, the requirement model, which is the use case, we develop the use case and the use case description, and we are in the analysis model. And today we will learn how to develop the dynamic model. So as two main steps here, you should know how to develop the sequence diagram, or you can say the outcome of the dynamic model. It's developing the sequence diagram and communication diagrams. And then based on the sequence and communication diagram, you should be able to develop in dynamic interaction model. In static model, we use to specify the structure of the object, the structure of the classes. So in the static model, we develop the class diagram, but in dynamic model, actually, we represent the behavior of the system. So in the dynamic model, we represent the interaction of these classes and the objects. Dynamic model used to express and model the behavior of the system over the times. So dynamic model here use some diagram to express that, such as a sequence diagram, communication diagram, state chart diagram, activity diagram. So such diagrams can be used for express the behavior of the system. So the main point here, we are focusing on the behavior of the model. Here we need to know how the objects of this system is communicate with each other. So in this model, in this class, we will know how to develop the sequence diagram and communication diagram. So dynamic model include dynamic interaction model approach. So it's used to determine how the object interact with each other. So the dynamic interaction model approach used to determine how the objects is communicate with each other. So the dynamic interaction model used to determine how the objects interact with each other and show the behavior of these objects. In dynamic model or in the dynamic interaction model, for each use cases, all the objects are identified, and then also the interaction between them over the times is determined. Uh, as well, the message and the communication between these objects are identified and expressed. So we use the communication diagram and sequence diagram to show the communication and the interaction of the object for each use cases. One more point need to be highlighted here is that we are developing a dynamic interaction model, and the dynamic interaction model have two types. The first is state dependent dynamic interaction model, which is based on the current situation of the system, while the other one is stateless, and this one don't consider the current situation of the system. So in this class we will learn how to develop the stateless dynamic interaction model, and the next class will be about the developing state dependent dynamic interaction model. So in this class we will describe the object interaction modeling by developing sequence and communication diagram, and then we will describe the dynamic interaction model or the stateless dynamic interaction model, and what's the step of developing the dynamic interaction model. Okay, so it's the dynamic interaction model. As we say, the dynamic interaction model is a model that show the interaction of the object with each other. So our dynamic interaction model, it's depends on your understanding of the use cases. In use cases, we develop the use cases, and then we develop also the use cases description. So if you not describe the use case description, the use case description well, you will not be able to develop the sequence and the communication diagram. So developing the use cases is important for this class, because in the use cases actually first we develop the use cases and the relation of the object inside these use cases. So we will use it here. The interaction, the relation of the objects. So the second, in the use case description, we describe the sequence of these use cases. So there we will use also the sequence of the interaction for determine the message between the objects. So for each for each use cases, we will determine the object that participate in these use cases. This is here we are talking about the how we can develop the interaction, the dynamic interaction. So first we should develop the use cases first well, and then based on the use cases we will determine the objects that participate in these use cases. So and then we will identify all the objects. So here we can use the criteria, the guidelines that we mentioned in the last class. There is object structuring criteria. It's from the last class we mentioned there is many type of objects, so we should identify all the objects in the use cases. So here also we will develop the interaction diagrams. So what we mean by the interaction diagrams, what we mean is the sequence diagram and the communication diagrams. So we should to develop the interaction diagram, which is the both is both of both of sequence and communication diagrams. Also, we should to determine the message passed between the objects. The last point here say that the interaction actually is depicted on either a communication diagram or sequence diagram. So in next video, both of the sequence diagram and communication diagram will be explained in details.